Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Trinity Davis. This is Tom Aldrich with 360 Privacy. We're going to talk a little bit about digital executive protection and how to navigate the digital space in today's ever-changing landscape. Tom, let's get this started off. We're going to go right into intro to digital executive protection. Given your prior background at Goldman and having worked with both small and large complex family offices, how did you broach the topic of cybersecurity and more specifically, digital protection?
Yeah, great question, Trinity. So first and foremost, whether we were meeting quarterly, semi-annually, or annually with our family office clients or the end principals, there were a number of different risks that we constantly were talking about in the current landscape, right? And as fiduciaries and professional risk managers, one of those things, or a couple of different topics, would be the Fed and interest rates, might be geopolitical risk, right? Look at what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And cybersecurity was also one of those topics that constantly needed to be talked about. The issue, or one of the complications with talking about cybersecurity, is a lot like financial terms and terminology. It can get relatively complex pretty quickly. So in terms of digital executive protection, Trinity, the best way to broach the topic, in my very humble opinion, is by making it personal and making it understandable to the end user, right? So an example of that would simply be to just look at the prevalence of what we call PII, or personally identifiable information, on the open internet. If we rewind the clock about 10 to 20 years, everybody's heard the term dark web. And previously, back then, it was solely used to find personal information like this on the web, right? Nowadays, and due to some very significant gaps in digital privacy law within the continental United States, a lot of that information, you don't need a separate server to get to it. There are hundreds of data broker websites out there that are purchasing your personal sensitive information, your shopping habits, where you like to go during the day, your pattern of life. They're purchasing that from hundreds of different companies. They're aggregating that information and they're tagging you to it, oftentimes unbeknownst to us, and that information is sold for as little as 20 or 30 bucks a month. So the first way to broach the topic, again, in our humble opinion, is by making it personal, making it understandable, and then finding somebody, whether it's within the family or the family office, who's essentially bought in to the idea that this is a risk and it's one that needs to be mitigated against. Advantages of having a program like this, whether it's a personally identifiable information scrubbing program or discovery program, is first and foremost, much like option hedging in the market, you are being proactive about an environment that changes on a day-to-day basis, right? So from the world you came in previously, Trinity, we always talk about this. If a fraudster, a bad actor, can't find the front door, it's going to mitigate a lot of the financial costs associated with putting gates, guns, and guards in and around that location, right? Very similar to your digital hygiene practice. If you are being careful about what you're sharing, who you're sharing it with, it's going to make you a harder target to essentially go after.
That's some really great points. Do you find that, especially when engaging in small family offices, do you find that this adds a lot of value to the program from the relationship manager?
Yeah, it's a great point. When I was at Goldman, whether it was a quarterly review or just a catch-up phone call, you always wanted to have a couple of things to talk about, right? Because the question would inevitably come up, or which is, how are things looking on our end, right? So having a solution like this is extremely valuable because it provides tangible evidence of work that's being done on behalf of the office or on behalf of the family itself, right? So you can kind of stick in a one slider regarding work that's been done over the past month, the past quarter, et cetera. So yes, I found it extremely helpful. Not to mention, much like you would do in finance with an outsourced investment officer, you can do the same thing, but on the information security side of the house. So we thought of this oftentimes as an outsourced information security officer.
Uh, Great points on that last question, Tom. I really want to dive in now to the education and really kind of do an introduction. And we really want to focus on why it's not only important for the executive spouse, children to benefit from an education program, but also the executive support infrastructure. So we're talking about EAs, PAs, proprietary or embedded executive protection programs. So can you walk us through the education piece from the perspective of a family office?
Yeah, it's a really great point again, Trinity, and it's super important because at the end of the day, we can throw a lot of technology at the principals or within the family itself to help mitigate against personally identifiable information getting out into the open and dark web. That said, at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is help mitigate the risk from somebody from the family clicking on something that they shouldn't, right? Or somebody from the family office, more importantly, because again, many of those tasks have been outsourced or handed down to members of the staff. So at the end of the day, it's education that's going to win the day. So much like we talked about with the first question, it's making it personal. So the benefit of technology nowadays is we all have the power of a supercomputer in our hands, be it our cell phones. So one thing that we can run through right now is just one of the tips and tricks for any of the Family Office Exchange members who have an iPhone in particular. So I'm going to start a broadcast here from my cell phone and give you just a good example of what that looks like. All right, so if I'm using this phone as an example, we're going to talk a little bit right now about something called significant locations on your iPhone. If you've never heard of it, so for iPhone and iCloud connected devices, this actually keeps track of the places you've recently been. Not only that, but how often you visit them and when you do that, right? And the whole purpose of that is to find places that are significant to you. So hence why it's called significant locations. I'm going to walk through step by step here, right? We're first going to go to our settings tab, right? So the gear icon. Within settings, right, you're going to start up here. You're going to scroll down until you find privacy and security. So it's that white hand with a blue background. At the very top, you'll see location services. I'm going to click on there. I'm then going to scroll all the way to the bottom to an item called system services. Again, another gear icon. From there, again, we're going to scroll all the way down, and from the top, I'm going to click on that significant locations button. You can see on mine, it's turned off. But if yours is turned on, I want you to click in there, and what you'll be able to see is actually where your phone has tracked your location over the past however many times you've had that on. In 2015, I woke up one morning while I was in the military, and my phone told me after it had gone through an update overnight that it was going to take me 7 minutes to get to a particular address. So I looked up the address, and lo and behold, it was the gym that I went to every morning. And I thought, oh, that's strange. I wonder how my phone knew how to get to where I normally go at that time of day. So did a little bit of digging, and significant locations is something that popped up.
That's perfect. So, and what about from an operational standpoint, with day-to-day communications?
Yeah, so from the family office's standpoint, right, we actually saw an example of this pop up relatively recently. So multi-factor authentication is something that everybody, I'm sure, who's listening to this is familiar with, right? It's something that you are and something that you know, right? Or something that you have, right? Something that you are, that could be a retina scan, a fingerprint. Something that you know, that's when we talk about the actual passwords. Or something that you have, right? That password could be in the form of a YubiKey, right? Or some type of hardware token. So enabling multi-factor authentication should be the first, biggest priority from the family office's standpoint, um, from our perspective, based on what we've seen. One glaring issue that we've run into over the past 12 months is the ability to bypass multi-factor authentication with security questions. We talked a little bit earlier about how easy it is to find very sensitive personal pieces of PII on the open web nowadays. All of those pieces of information, Trinity, can be used to answer security questions. And you and I are no different, right? As human beings, we are programmed to, when we create security questions, to give actual answers, answers that are attributable to us. If there's a saying that I've heard recently is pretty funny, is there's no such thing as a security question police. So if you're creating security questions, you can make them purposefully invalid or false so as to validate that the answer is indeed one that you came up with. But getting back to the earlier point, right? If you can bypass multi-factor authentication with security questions, and one of those security questions is, what was your least favorite food growing up, right? And that one of the answers happens to be broccoli. Chances are you've now compromised what was a robust security system in place. So that's the first thing we try to harp on with whether it's newer family offices or an existing older infrastructure that is looking to kind of upgrade its resources. The second thing, we talk about email traffic, right? So if it's not the phone that we constantly have or we're talking to, voice or text, it's emails. So embedding things like zero knowledge into, or utilizing emails that have zero knowledge embedded into them, is extremely important. And what zero knowledge is, Trinity, is, right, if you think about utilizing Gmail, right? So if I'm sending an email to you, Trinity, and in between us is the Gmail server, when I send you that email, it's first going to hit the server. It will then get encrypted with a bunch of letters and numbers, and then get sent to you, right? And what unlocks it from the server is our private keys. However, with zero knowledge, what will happen is that message will get encrypted at the user at the user level before it hits a server. So what that will do, and the question we obviously get is, right, like, who cares? Basically, what you can help avoid there is, if you have a hack or a breach at the server level, it's like somebody's going into a bank, they rob the bank, and they come out with a bunch of big locked security deposits, right? They can't get into the security box because they don't have your key yet. So instituting or utilizing emails that have zero knowledge is also extremely important. The other thing we bring up is file storage, and then everyday use of things like Google reviews or photos on profiles, etc. With file storage, right? Again, ensuring you have end-to-end encryption, and taking a look, take an extra 10-20 minutes to take a look at the reviews. Feel free to ask a trusted cybersecurity vendor about the platforms that they use, because that's oftentimes the proof in the pudding. But then, going back to, Google reviews and contributions, things like that, we don't realize it and we all fall victim to it. But, if we're leaving a review about a restaurant we went to, or, local hair salon, barbershop, what have you, what that's doing is that's just dropping, pins around what is oftentimes the primary or secondary location where we lay our heads at night. And that information is very easily accessible. So those are just a couple of the items from the operational standpoint that family offices can begin to implement as soon as today. So Trinity, I'm going to flip the script a little bit here. And again, based on your personal background and all that you've accomplished, if a family office is considering a digital executive protection or personally identifiable information deletion services, what are some of the questions that they should be asking as they go through the diligence process?
Sure. So, I know that this is an odd analogy, but if I'm purchasing a car, right, I don't want to just go online, look at all the features I'm looking for, and then just purchase it sight unseen, right? I want to actually go and test drive the car, kick the tires, drive around the block a couple of times. I essentially want some proof that the vehicle I'm purchasing is of sound quality. Same thing here, right? There's a lot of competitors in the space that say that they can do this daunting task of removing PII from the web. I want a company to actually prove it to me, right? Walk me through the steps, show me the process, help me understand maybe, some of the more complex issues in getting past CAPTCHA walls and those sort of things. I want to understand at the molecular level how the process works so that I can determine for myself, like, is this a sound investment? Is it going to be a solid return on investment for the company, if that makes sense? Number two, compare it. So, do a side-by-side comparison, not only from the perspective of just looking at, data cut sheets, right? Talk to several of the competitors in the space, get to know their teams, their processes, what sets them apart, how many sites are they covering, if any of the actioned items are offshored, like really understand, who the competitors are in the space and what they all say they can do. This is another one that is super, super important, is understanding the enrollment process. What information does the company need from me in order to remove PII for my executive leadership team, for the family I'm charged with protecting, etc.? What information do they need from me in order to actually action a takedown? It's a little counterintuitive for myself, in director positions, charged with the responsibility of protecting ultra high net worth families. It's a little counterintuitive for me to provide PII, copies of passports, those sorts of things, in order for you to actually start actioning, PII takedowns or removals. So I really want to control that information as much as possible outside of, my small sphere. So again, what information is needed to actually enroll the client, and then refer it. So any of the vendors that are in this space, they're going to have brand champions, right? So you, as a director, as a managing director of a family office, chief of staff, chief security officer, etc., you should want to be talking to your peers in the space that are actively utilizing this product to protect the family, the executive leadership team, etc. So ask to speak to, other peers in the space that are utilizing the product. That way you can get an unbiased opinion of the pros and cons of the product, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Tom?
I think so. So you're saying we shouldn't take the advice of the salesperson right away.
That is correct.
That
is correct.
It may have an ulterior motive. Okay, got it.
It's possible.
Well, Trinity, thank you again for the time today. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and we hope everybody listening in today was able to take away something from today's call.
Likewise, Tom.